Welcome to her new peak. Subscribe for stories of growth, resilience, and new beginnings. Chapter 1. The divorce petition arrived while Claire Whitmore was standing in the ballroom her husband had borrowed from her family trust. It came in a cream envelope, delivered by a junior associate with frightened eyes and a trembling hand, just as Martin Whitmore lifted a glass of champagne beside the woman he had once called a mistake. The orchestra was playing something soft and expensive. The donors of the Whitmore Children's Cardiac Foundation were smiling beneath chandeliers that had been imported from Vienna 40 years ago. And beside Martin, wearing Claire's mother's pearl earrings, stood Vanessa Hale. Vanessa did not even pretend to be discreet. She tilted her head so the pearls caught the light, then rested one manicured hand on Martin's arm, as if she had paid for the right to stand there. Her white silk dress looked bridal under the ballroom lights. Claire's dress was navy, plain, and cut without ornament, the kind of gown people forgot 2 minutes after seeing it. That had always been useful. Martin turned when he noticed the envelope in Claire's hand. His smile did not fade. It sharpened. "I wanted you to receive it in a civilized setting," he said, loud enough for the nearest table to hear. "No scenes, Claire. You were always good at dignity." A few guests went still. Someone's fork touched porcelain with a delicate click. Claire looked at the envelope, then at the man she had married 11 years earlier when he was a brilliant surgeon with debt, ambition, and a rented office above a pharmacy. His tuxedo fit beautifully now. The watch on his wrist cost more than his first house. The foundation bearing his name had become the center of his public image. He had built that image with her silence, her introductions, her money, and her willingness to let him stand in front of cameras while she stood 3 steps behind. Vanessa smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. "Martin said it would be kinder if we were honest tonight. Everyone knows anyway." Claire's fingers tightened around the envelope for half a second. Only half. Then she slid one nail beneath the flap and opened it. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Emergency request for temporary control of marital residence. Temporary injunction against disposal of shared assets. Claire read the first page without blinking. Martin watched her the way men watched glass they expected to crack. "You filed this morning," she said. "I did. And you came here tonight. To make sure you understood the situation before rumors reached you." His voice was smooth, almost gentle, which made the cruelty cleaner. "Vanessa and I have history, real history. I tried to do the honorable thing with you, but some marriages are arrangements, not love stories." Claire heard the small intake of breath from Mrs. Ellison, the hospital board chair, seated 2 tables away. She heard Vanessa's bracelet slide against Martin's sleeve. She heard her own pulse, slow and steady, as if something inside her had stepped back from the pain to take notes. Martin leaned closer. "I'm asking you to cooperate. Keep the house peaceful. Keep the foundation stable. Don't embarrass yourself trying to fight a battle you cannot win." There it was, the old habit. He confused her quiet for surrender because surrender had benefited him. Claire folded the petition carefully along its original crease. "Did your attorney advise you to serve this here?" she asked. Martin's smile flickered. "My attorney advised me to protect my assets before you became emotional." "My assets," Vanessa murmured, soft as perfume. "Our future." Claire looked at the pearls on Vanessa's ears. Her mother had worn them in the last photograph taken before the car accident. They had been locked in Claire's private safe until 3 weeks ago, when Martin claimed he needed them for a charity display, honoring the women behind the foundation. Claire had allowed him to take them because she already knew whom he intended to give them to. She had simply needed proof. A waiter approached with a tray, saw the documents, and retreated so quickly the champagne trembled in the glasses. Martin extended his hand. "Claire, give me the petition back for now. We don't need you waving legal papers around at a donor gala." She placed the folded packet into her clutch. "No," she said. The word was not loud. It moved through the nearest tables anyway. Martin's face hardened and Vanessa's smile thinned. "No?" Martin repeated. "No." Claire looked past him toward the security director at the ballroom entrance, a retired federal marshal named Diane Mercer. Diane's posture changed the instant Claire met her eyes. "You chose the setting. I am only choosing the procedure." Martin gave a short laugh. "Procedure? You have no procedure here. This is my foundation's gala." Claire looked around the room, at the silver monogram on the menus, at the donors who had come because her family office invited them, at the hospital executives who knew enough to stay silent and not enough to understand why. Then she turned back to Martin. This ballroom belongs to the Ashford Trust, she said. The Foundation's operating reserve sits in an account collateralized by Ashford Holdings. The house you intend to occupy during divorce proceedings is held in my separate trust. The lake property, the surgical center lease, the apartment in Boston, the art collection, and the donor platform you use for your public image are not marital assets. Martin stared at her. Vanessa's hand slipped from his arm. Claire continued, calm enough to make the silence painful. They never were. Chapter 2. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Martin smiled again, but it no longer reached the shape of confidence. It was the smile of a man searching his memory for a document he had never bothered to read. Claire, he said, lowering his voice, this is not the time for one of your dramatic little misunderstandings. She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the line was so completely him. Even now, after serving divorce papers in public beside his former lover, he needed to frame her reality as confusion. Vanessa recovered first. She touched one pearl earring, a gesture she must have practiced in mirrors. Martin told me you helped with some introductions in the beginning. That doesn't mean you own his life. No, Claire said. It means I own what my mother left me, what my father protected, and what I legally separated from this marriage before Martin performed his first televised surgery. Martin's jaw moved. He looked toward the hospital board chair, then toward the donors, calculating damage. Claire had watched him calculate for years. He could assess a room faster than most men could read a headline. It was one of the reasons she had once admired him. Diane Mercer crossed the ballroom with 2 security officers behind her. She did not hurry. People like Diane never did. She stopped beside Claire, not Martin. Mrs. Whitmore, Diane said, do you want the private conference room opened? Martin's face changed. It was small, but Claire saw it, the first crack in the evening. Diane, he said sharply, this is a family matter. Diane did not look at him. The trust security protocol was activated by Mrs. Whitmore. Vanessa blinked. Trust security? Claire opened her clutch and removed her phone. One message sat waiting from Evelyn Grant, General Counsel to the Ashford family office. Emergency asset separation complete. Temporary freezes active. Board packets ready. Pearl inventory documentation secured. Awaiting instruction. Claire did not show the message to Martin, not yet. She looked at Diane. Open the conference room. Ask Evelyn to join by video. And please inform the hotel manager that Mr. Whitmore and Ms. Hale are no longer authorized to access the Ashford suite upstairs. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. Excuse me? Martin's voice dropped into the tone he used with frightened residents at the hospital. You will not humiliate me in front of my donors. Your donors? Claire asked. His eyes warned her. For years that look had worked. It said behave, smile, do not make this difficult, remember what people will think. It had worked at dinners where he interrupted her, at hospital openings where he introduced her as my steady wife and nothing more, at interviews where he accepted praise for projects funded by her trust. Tonight, the look arrived too late. Claire stepped to the microphone at the small stage beside the string quartet. A murmur passed through the ballroom. Martin moved fast, but Diane moved faster. She shifted just enough to block his path without touching him. Don't, she said. He stopped, stunned by the fact that someone he considered staff had spoken to him like a boundary. Claire tapped the microphone once. The sound rolled through the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice steady, I apologize for the interruption. Some of you have just witnessed a private legal matter become public because my husband chose to serve divorce papers during tonight's event. A ripple moved across the tables. Vanessa went pale under her makeup. Martin stared at Claire as if he could force the words back into her mouth. Claire continued. The Foundation's work will continue. The children awaiting surgery will remain protected. The staff will be paid. The research grants will not be interrupted. I know that is the first concern for many of you. Mrs. Ellison slowly set down her glass. However, Claire said, effective immediately, the Ashford Trust is reviewing all use of its facilities, assets, donor channels, and restricted funds connected to Martin Whitmore. Martin took one step forward. Claire, enough. The microphone caught it. Everyone heard him. Claire looked at him across the flowers, candles, and stunned faces. You filed for divorce this morning, she said. You asked the court to restrain me from moving assets you described as marital property. So before that petition could be used to mislead a judge, I instructed counsel to document, separate, and secure every asset that belonged to me before this marriage, every inheritance held by my trust, and every foundation resource restricted from personal use. Vanessa whispered, "Martin?" He ignored her. Claire's voice softened, which somehow made the room lean closer. "You wanted to return to your former lover. That is your choice. But you will not take my mother's earrings, my father's trust, my family's properties, my foundation's donor network, or the hospital funds meant for sick children with you." No one clapped. It was not that kind of moment. The silence was heavier and far more useful. Martin's face had gone gray beneath the ballroom lights. Chapter 3. In the private conference room behind the ballroom, Martin finally stopped pretending to be civilized. The room was paneled in dark walnut, with a long table polished to a mirror shine. On any other night, it was where donors signed pledges and surgeons shook hands with wealthy people who liked seeing their names on buildings. Tonight, it held Claire, Martin, Vanessa, Diane, Mrs. Ellison from the hospital board, and Evelyn Grant's face on a wall-mounted screen. Evelyn was 62, silver-haired, narrow-eyed, and famous in 3 states for making aggressive men read documents twice. She wore a black blazer and no jewelry except a thin watch. Claire had known her since childhood. Evelyn had handled Claire's inheritance after the accident, then taught her the first rule of family wealth: never confuse access with ownership. Martin had confused the two for years. "This meeting is unnecessary," he snapped. "My divorce attorney will handle this." "Your divorce attorney has already received a preservation packet," Evelyn said. "So has Mrs. Whitmore's attorney. So has the family court clerk, by courtesy copy, attached to tomorrow morning's filing." Martin's eyes narrowed. "You contacted the court?" "We notified counsel that your petition contains claims about assets you do not own." Evelyn's tone was dry. "That is not the same as contacting the court ex parte. I know the difference. Do you?" Vanessa shifted in her chair. The pearls looked heavier on her now. Claire sat at the far end of the table with her hands folded. The first wave of hurt had not vanished. It had changed shape. It was no longer a wound begging for explanation. It was a fact placed carefully among other facts. Martin pointed at her. "This is what you do? You sit quietly for years and then ambush me with lawyers?" Claire met his eyes. "No. I sat quietly for years while you called my restraint loyalty. Tonight you served me divorce papers beside your mistress at a gala funded by my trust." "She is not my mistress," he said automatically. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. Evelyn looked down at something off-screen. For accuracy, Ms. Hale was named in 3 hotel invoices charged through Mr. Whitmore's discretionary account, 2 foundation travel reimbursements now under review, and several messages in which Mr. Whitmore referred to her as his partner before the divorce petition was filed. Martin's head snapped toward the screen. "Those are private." They became relevant when foundation funds were touched. Mrs. Ellison's face tightened. She had spent 20 years protecting the hospital from scandal. Claire could see the exact moment her sympathy for Martin became institutional alarm. Vanessa turned to Martin. "You told me the trips were paid personally." "They were," he said too quickly. Evelyn lifted one eyebrow. "That will be determined by the audit." Martin pushed back from the table. "Audit? You have no authority to audit me." Claire spoke before Evelyn could. "The foundation board does. The Ashford Trust does where restricted funds and facilities are concerned, and the hospital does if donor money was misrepresented." He looked at her as if seeing a stranger. "Since when do you understand any of this?" The question landed harder than the divorce papers, not because it surprised her, but because it carried 11 years of his contempt in one sentence. He truly believed she had been a decorative wife who wrote thank you notes and chose flowers. Claire leaned back. "Since before you met me." Martin laughed once. "You were 24, you inherited money and hired people to manage it." "I inherited responsibility," she said. "There is a difference." Evelyn's screen changed. A document appeared, clean and merciless. Ashford Trust Asset Schedule. Separate property documentation. Premarital disclosure receipt. Martin stared. Evelyn said, "Mr. Whitmore signed the premarital disclosure 11 years ago, acknowledging that Ashford Holdings, including the Fairmont Avenue residence, the Lake House, the Surgical Center leasehold, the charitable donor platform, and all assets derived from the Ashford Trust remained Claire Ashford Whitmore's separate property." Vanessa whispered. You signed that? Martin did not answer. The document zoomed to his signature. Young Martin's handwriting slashed across the page with confidence. Claire remembered the day. He had joked that paperwork bored him. He had kissed her forehead and said, I trust you, darling. He had trusted her because he thought trust meant she would never use the paper. Evelyn continued. We also have annual acknowledgments signed by Mr. Whitmore in connection with trust-funded foundation facilities. Another document appeared. Another signature. Mrs. Ellison folded her hands. Martin, did you represent any of these assets as personally controlled by you in donor solicitations? His silence answered before he did. I represented continuity, he said at last. The donors care about the work. The work is exactly what I am protecting, Claire said. He turned on her, anger finally burning through the polished surface. No, you are punishing me because I chose Vanessa. Claire looked at Vanessa. The younger woman sat very still now, one hand hovering near the pearl earring as if afraid to touch it. No, Claire said. I am stopping you from taking what was never yours. Chapter 4. Vanessa Hale had spent the first hour of the gala believing she had won. Claire had seen it in every small performance. The way Vanessa arrived on Martin's arm 15 minutes late, forcing the room to turn. The way she greeted donors by their first names after clearly learning them from Martin in the car. The way she let the pearls show when photographers passed, giving the impression that she had inherited a place rather than borrowed it. Now in the conference room, victory had drained from her posture. I should go, Vanessa said. No, Evelyn said from the screen. Not yet. Vanessa froze. I'm not part of your marriage. Claire almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Vanessa was 34, beautiful and ambitious in the hungry way of people who had been close to wealth but never inside its walls. She had dated Martin before Claire when he was still a resident. He had left Vanessa because Claire's world opened doors Vanessa could not. Years later, he had gone back to Vanessa and told her a story in which Claire was cold, passionless, and dependent on him. Men like Martin did not just betray, they recruited witnesses to their version of betrayal. You are part of the audit, Evelyn said. You received jewelry belonging to Mrs. Whitmore's separate estate. You occupied the Ashford suite this afternoon. You appear in messages discussing the expected transfer of the Fairmont residence after the divorce. Vanessa's lips parted. Martin said, Evelyn, stop trying to intimidate her. Claire turned to him. Did you tell Vanessa she would live in my house? He did not answer. Vanessa looked at him. You said the house was yours. It is our marital home, he snapped. It is my family home, Claire said. You moved in after the wedding with 2 suitcases and a medical school debt consolidation plan. Color climbed Martin's neck. I made that house what it is. You renovated a kitchen with trust approval and then billed the trust for half of the appliances because you said donor dinners required commercial capacity. Mrs. Ellison closed her eyes for one brief moment. Vanessa's voice sharpened. Martin, you told me Claire would have to leave. You said your lawyer had already arranged temporary control. My lawyer requested it, he said. Based on what? Claire asked. His gaze flickered toward the petition in her clutch. Claire removed it, opened it, and read aloud. Petitioner requests exclusive use of the marital residence to prevent disruption to his professional obligations and charitable duties. She looked up. You told the court removing me from my own family home was necessary for your work with sick children. Martin's hands curled on the table. Evelyn said, we are preparing a response with ownership records, trust restrictions, and evidence of pre-filing plans to install Miss Hale in the residence. Vanessa whispered, Install? Claire heard the hurt there. It did not absolve Vanessa, but it revealed something useful. Vanessa had thought she was being chosen. In Martin's documents, she had been logistics. Martin stood. This meeting is over. Diane moved to the door. Mr. Whitmore, the ballroom is still active. I can escort you through the service corridor if you prefer privacy. He stared at her. Do you know who I am? Diane's expression did not change. Yes. It was the simplicity that humiliated him. Claire rose slowly. Before you leave, return the earrings. Vanessa's hand flew to her ear. Martin said, they were a gift. They were stolen property if you gave them without authority. Claire looked at Vanessa. They belonged to my mother. For the first time that night, Vanessa looked directly at Claire without performance. Something like shame moved across her face, quickly buried under fear. Martin said they were from his family, she said. Claire did not soften. He lied. Vanessa removed the earrings with fingers that trembled. She placed them on the table, one by one. The pearls made almost no sound, but everyone heard it. Martin looked disgusted. Vanessa, don't let her do this. Vanessa laughed, a small broken sound. Do what? Tell me where the jewelry came from. You said she had no family left to care. Claire went still. Martin's eyes flashed with warning, but Vanessa had crossed from embarrassment into anger, and anger made people careless. He said you were just attached to old things because you had nothing else, Vanessa said, tears brightening but not falling. He said once the divorce started, you'd fold because you couldn't handle public conflict. He said he knew exactly how to make you quiet. The room changed temperature. Claire picked up the earrings. The pearls were warm from another woman's skin. For a moment she was 20 again, standing beside two coffins while Evelyn told her the trust would protect her if she learned how to protect herself. Then Claire closed her hand around the pearls. Thank you, she said. Martin barked. For what? For confirming intent. Chapter 5. By midnight, Martin Whitmore had lost 3 things he believed were permanent. His access card to the Ashford suite stopped working first. Vanessa discovered it when she tried to retrieve her overnight bag from the bedroom she had apparently planned to share with him after the gala. The red light blinked once, cold and final. A hotel manager arrived with Diane and explained that Miss Hale's belongings would be packed by female staff and delivered to the lobby. Martin called it harassment. Diane called it property protocol. His second loss came 20 minutes later, when the hospital board chair suspended his authority over all foundation expenditures pending review. Mrs. Ellison did it in a voice so polite it could have cut paper. Martin argued that patients depended on him. Mrs. Ellison replied that patients depended on ethical stewardship more than any one surgeon's ego. The third loss came at 12:17 a.m. when his phone began ringing without pause. Donors, board members, his attorney, a public relations consultant he had once mocked for being overpriced and now called 6 times in 10 minutes. Claire did not watch him unravel. She returned to the ballroom. The gala had not collapsed. That mattered. The string quartet had been replaced by soft piano. Dessert was being served. Guests spoke in lower voices, but no one had left in scandalized droves. The children's cardiac program director, Dr. Anika Shah, stood near the stage speaking with donors, her expression controlled but grateful. When Claire approached, Anika touched her arm. Are you all right? It was the first time all night anyone had asked the question without wanting something from the answer. Claire inhaled, not entirely. Anika nodded as if that was the only honest response. I'm sorry, Claire said, for the disruption. You protected the program. Anika looked toward the conference room doors. We all wondered how much of Martin's charm was theater. I didn't know it was this much. Claire gave a tired smile. Neither did I at first. On the stage, the microphone waited. Claire should have been exhausted, but a strange clarity held her upright. The night was not over. Martin had chosen a public setting because he believed public pressure would trap her. The only way out was through the same room, with steadier facts. She stepped back onto the stage. This time, no one murmured. They simply turned. Thank you for your patience, Claire said. Tonight has been difficult, but the purpose of this gala remains unchanged. The children whose surgeries are funded through this program will not become collateral damage in a private divorce or a governance review. Several faces softened. For those who do not know me beyond my married name, I am Claire Ashford Whitmore. The Ashford Trust has supported this cardiac program since its first operating room opened. That support will continue, but it will move forward under independent oversight effective tomorrow. Mrs. Ellison gave the smallest nod from the front table. Claire continued. All restricted donations will remain restricted. All pledged surgeries will be funded. An independent audit will review administrative expenses, travel reimbursements, and asset use connected to foundation leadership. She did not name Martin again. She did not need to. Everyone knew. At the close of tonight's event, she said, the Ashford Trust will match every new donation made in this room, dollar for dollar, up to $5 million. Not in honor of any individual, in honor of the children who were never supposed to be bargaining chips. For a moment, silence. Then applause rose. Not wild, not theatrical, but firm. Respect sounded different from excitement. Claire had forgotten that. From the side entrance Martin watched. Vanessa stood several feet behind him, arms wrapped around herself, no pearls, no triumphant smile. The photographers, sensing the safer story, turned their lenses toward Claire, Mrs. Ellison, and Dr. Shaw. Martin stepped forward as Claire left the stage. "You think applause makes you righteous?" he hissed. "No," Claire said. "The documents help." His eyes were bloodshot now. "You moved assets while I was filing for divorce. I secured separate property while you attempted to misclassify it. You emptied accounts. I transferred trust funds from accounts you had discretionary access to after evidence showed misuse risk. The marital accounts remain untouched and documented." He flinched because she knew the distinction, because Evelyn had taught her to know it, because for years he had believed the language of money belonged to him when in fact he had been speaking inside a house she owned. Martin leaned close enough that Diane shifted nearby. "I will make you look vindictive," he whispered. "I will tell everyone you destroyed a medical foundation because you couldn't keep your husband." Claire looked past him at the room full of donors signing new pledge cards. "Then I will publish the audit." The threat landed cleanly. He stepped back. Vanessa approached slowly. "Martin, we should leave." He turned on her with such contempt that even Claire felt the old chill of recognition. "We? You think there is a we after you sat in that room and repeated private conversations like a fool?" Vanessa recoiled. There it was, the fifth turn of the blade. Martin could not tolerate a witness once she stopped being useful. Claire did not rescue Vanessa from the consequence of her choices, but she did not let Martin use the room as another stage for cruelty. "Diane," Claire said, "please escort Miss Hale to collect her belongings separately." Vanessa looked at Claire, humiliated and grateful and angry all at once. Why? Because no woman should have to leave with a man who just showed her exactly what he does when cornered. Martin laughed bitterly. "You're playing saint now?" Claire met his gaze. "No, I am setting a boundary." Chapter 6. The next morning, the divorce petition that Martin expected to control became the least useful document in the courthouse. Claire arrived at the family court building at 8:42 a.m. wearing a charcoal suit, low heels, and her mother's pearls in her coat pocket instead of on her ears. Evelyn walked beside her with a leather folder. Claire's divorce attorney, Priya Nair, met them at security with coffee and an expression that suggested she had slept 3 hours and enjoyed none of them. "The emergency response is filed," Priya said. "We attached the trust schedules, premarital acknowledgments, title records, and preliminary affidavit from Diane Mercer. We also filed opposition to exclusive occupancy." "His attorney?" Claire asked. "Already here, looking unhappy." Claire almost asked whether Martin was here with Vanessa, then stopped herself. The answer did not matter. That was new and painful and freeing all at once. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Martin stood with his attorney, a sleek man named Conrad Bell who specialized in making wealthy divorces sound like moral crusades. Martin's face was carefully composed. He had shaved, changed into a dark suit, and recovered enough arrogance to look offended by the building. Vanessa was not with him. Conrad approached with a professional smile. "Mrs. Whitmore, I hope we can lower the temperature today." Priya smiled back. "Your client served divorce papers at a donor gala beside his affair partner while seeking to occupy my client's separate residence. The temperature is a natural consequence." Conrad's smile dimmed. Martin looked at Claire. "We can still handle this privately if you stop escalating." Claire studied him. Without the chandeliers and applause, he looked smaller. Not weak, but ordinary in the way powerful men often looked when removed from borrowed rooms. "You mean quietly," she said. "Not privately." He leaned closer. "You don't want discovery, Claire?" "Actually," Priya said, "we do." The courtroom opened before Martin could answer. Judge Helena Morris was known for punctuality and dislike of theatrics. She listened to Conrad describe Martin as a distinguished surgeon facing sudden financial aggression from an emotionally wounded spouse. She listened to Priya describe the trust, the premarital disclosures, the gala service, the attempted occupancy request, and the restricted foundation funds. Then she asked one question. "Mr. Bell, did your client sign these acknowledgments?" Conrad adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, we need time to review the context." That is not my question. A muscle jumped in Martin's cheek. Conrad said, the signatures appear to be his. Judge Morris turned a page. And did your client request exclusive use of a residence titled to the Ashford Trust? We believed it to be the marital residence. Belief is not title. Claire stared down at her hands to hide the tremor that passed through them. Not fear. Release. For years she had handled Martin through mood, timing, silence, and careful avoidance of his pride. Here, in this room, pride did not matter as much as paper. The judge denied Martin's emergency request for occupancy. She maintained ordinary preservation orders over actual marital assets, but excluded documented separate trust property. She ordered both parties not to interfere with foundation operations and scheduled a hearing on financial disclosures. Then Priya rose again. Your Honor, we also request that Mr. Whitmore return any separate property belonging to my client's estate and preserve all communications concerning Ms. Vanessa Hale, foundation travel, donor reimbursements, and planned use of the Ashford residence. Conrad objected. Judge Morris overruled part, narrowed part, and granted enough that Martin's face hardened into something close to hatred. Outside the courtroom, he waited until the attorneys stepped aside. You enjoyed that, he said. Claire looked at him. No. Don't lie. I did not enjoy learning how much of our life you were willing to steal. He scoffed. Steal. Such a dramatic word from a woman who never cared about money until she could use it as a weapon. There it was again, the old rewriting. Claire felt the familiar urge to explain herself, to list every check signed, every meeting attended, every quiet rescue made behind his career. She let the urge pass. You're right about one thing, she said. I did not care about money as decoration. I care about what it protects. And what does it protect now? My home, my parents' legacy, the foundation's patience, my staff, my future. His laugh was sharp. Your future? Claire, you built your life around me. She looked at him for a long second. No, she said. I built a life that had room for you. You mistook the room for ownership. Martin had no answer for that, or perhaps he had too many and none safe to say in a courthouse hallway. Claire walked away first. Chapter 7. The audit began on a Monday and spread through Martin's life like daylight through a room he thought was locked. It started with receipts. Hotel rooms listed as donor strategy retreats, private flights described as hospital outreach, jewelry transport fees hidden inside event logistics, a consulting invoice from a shell company tied to Vanessa's apartment renovation. None of it was large enough alone to destroy a man who had built his reputation on saving children, but together it formed a pattern. Patterns were what Evelyn loved most. People lie in speeches, she told Claire in the Ashford family office conference room. They tell the truth in reimbursements. Claire sat beside stacks of printed records, laptop open, coffee cooling untouched. Outside the tall windows, rain turned the city silver. She had slept badly since the gala, not because she missed Martin's presence, but because her body had not yet learned that peace could exist without waiting for his next demand. Priya joined by video. Conrad wants mediation. Evelyn smiled without warmth. Of course he does. What terms? Claire asked. Martin offers to withdraw claim to the Fairmont residence if you agree not to pursue foundation-related reimbursement issues personally and keep all relationship details confidential. Claire looked at the rain. Martin still believed shame was her weak point. He still believed she would pay to avoid being discussed. No, she said. Priya nodded. I expected that. I don't need relationship details public, Claire said. I need the money restored, the records corrected, and him removed from any position where he can touch restricted funds. Evelyn's eyes softened for half a second. That is the right line. 2 days later, Vanessa requested a meeting. Priya advised against it unless counsel was present. Claire agreed. They met in a small office with glass walls and no softness. Vanessa arrived in a gray coat, hair pulled back, face bare of the bright confidence she had worn at the gala. She looked younger and more tired. A woman after the stage lights had been switched off. I'm not here to apologize and expect forgiveness, Vanessa said as soon as she sat. I know that's not how this works. Claire said nothing. Vanessa placed a flash drive on the table. Martin told me to delete everything. Messages, voice notes, pictures from trips. He said if I didn't, his attorney would say I extorted him. Priya leaned forward. And did you delete anything? No. Vanessa swallowed. I was angry. I wanted to keep proof that he chose me. The honesty was ugly, but it was honest. Claire looked at the flash drive. Why bring it now? Because he didn't choose me. Vanessa's voice shook, then steadied. He chose whatever version of himself I made him feel like, and when that stopped helping, he called me a liability. Claire felt no triumph. Only the dull recognition of another person discovering Martin's love was mostly a mirror. Vanessa continued. There are messages about the house, about the foundation trips, about the earrings, and one where he says he wants the divorce filed before your annual trust review because he thinks you won't notice in time. Evelyn, who had been silent in the corner, lifted her head. That will be useful. Vanessa's eyes filled. I wore your mother's earrings because I wanted him to mean it when he said I belonged beside him. I knew he was married. I knew it was wrong. I told myself your marriage was dead because that made me less guilty. Claire studied her. The old Claire might have comforted her out of habit. The new Claire, or perhaps the original Claire returning at last, understood that compassion did not require removing consequences. You will need your own attorney, Claire said. If you used or received funds improperly, that has to be addressed. Vanessa nodded. I know. I am not going to protect you from accountability. I know that too. But I will make sure Martin does not use you as the only container for blame. Vanessa wiped her cheek quickly, embarrassed by the tear. Why would you do that? Claire looked at the flash drive. Because I know what it feels like to be useful to him until the truth becomes inconvenient. Chapter 8. Martin's downfall did not happen in one dramatic crash. It happened in scheduled meetings. First, the Foundation Board voted to remove him from all financial authority pending completion of the audit. The announcement was careful, legal, and devastating. It praised his surgical contributions while separating them from governance. Martin hated that most. He could fight an insult. He could not easily fight a sentence that sounded reasonable. Then the hospital placed him on administrative leave from leadership duties. He kept clinical privileges under review because no one wanted to punish patients, but his office was cleared of donor files, foundation records, and private event invitations. Then Conrad Bell withdrew the occupancy demand and amended the divorce filing to acknowledge disputed separate property claims. The revised language was bland. Claire knew Martin must have despised every word. Finally, the Gala photos appeared in a society magazine. Not the ones Martin wanted. The published image showed Claire at the microphone, shoulders straight, face calm, Mrs. Ellison and Dr. Shaw behind her. The caption read, Claire Ashford Whitmore announces independent oversight and $5 million matching commitment for children's cardiac care. Martin was not mentioned until paragraph 6. He called her that evening. Claire considered letting it go to voicemail. Then she answered, because avoidance no longer felt like peace. It felt like an old reflex she was ready to retire. What do you want, Martin? Silence crackled through the line. Then his voice, lower than usual. You destroyed me. No, I documented you. You took everything. I took my assets. The court will divide whatever is actually marital. You know what I mean. She stood in the library of the Fairmont house, looking at the shelves her father had built. For years, Martin had complained the room felt too old, too heavy, too full of ghosts. Claire had once offered to redecorate it. Tonight she was grateful she had not. I know exactly what you mean, she said. You mean the house you wanted to move Vanessa into, the foundation you wanted to use as a shield, the donors you treated as your audience, the history you borrowed until you thought it was yours. His breath came harshly. I loved you once. That sentence found the bruise beneath all the structure. Claire closed her eyes. I know, she said. It was true. That was the worst part. Martin had loved her once, or something close enough to love that a younger Claire had built a marriage around it. He had laughed in her kitchen at midnight. He had held her hand at her father's memorial. He had cried after his first child patient died, and Claire had believed the tenderness in him would outgrow the vanity. It had not. Or perhaps the vanity had been there all along, waiting for enough applause to become a god. I loved you too, she said. That is why I gave you chances you mistook for weakness. Martin was quiet. For the first time since the gala, he sounded tired instead of angry. What happens now? Now your attorney speaks to mine. The foundation completes the audit. You repay what you misused. You stop using my name, my house, my family, or sick children as leverage. And us? Claire opened her eyes. On the mantel stood a photograph of her parents in the garden, her mother wearing the pearls. Claire had placed the earrings beside it in a small velvet box. There is no us, she said. He inhaled as if struck. Claire. No, you filed for divorce to go back to your former lover. You served me in public because you thought humiliation would keep me compliant. You tried to take assets you knew were not yours. The marriage ended before the petition. The petition only put a date on it. She ended the call before he could turn remorse into negotiation. Then she stood in the quiet library until the silence stopped feeling empty. Chapter 9. 3 months later, Claire returned to the same ballroom. The chandeliers were still too bright. The floor still held a shine deep enough to reflect candlelight. But the monograms had changed. The evening no longer carried Martin's name in gold script. It belonged to the Ashford Children's Heart Initiative, governed by an independent board, chaired by Dr. Annika Shah, funded by donors who had stayed after seeing the difference between scandal and stewardship. Claire almost did not attend. Part of her wanted a smaller life for a while, rooms without microphones, dinners without watching every doorway. But Evelyn reminded her that retreat was different from rest. You do not have to hide from rooms you paid to make honest, Evelyn said. So Claire came. She wore a deep green gown and her mother's pearls. Not because jewelry proved anything, but because recovery sometimes required touching what had been mishandled and deciding it was still yours. At the entrance, Diane nodded to her. Good evening, Miss Ashford. Claire had taken back her birth name after the temporary divorce order. Hearing it in public still felt like stepping into shoes that had waited patiently by the door. Good evening, Diane. Inside, the mood was different, lighter, but not shallow. Doctors spoke with families whose children had survived surgery. Donors listened more than they performed. The program displayed outcomes, budgets, and patient support plans on clean screens without a single glamour photograph of Martin. Near the stage, Claire saw Vanessa. For a moment, both women stilled. Vanessa wore a simple black dress and stood beside a woman Claire recognized as her attorney. She had agreed to cooperate with the audit, return gifts purchased through improper accounts, and repay what she could through a structured settlement. She had also given a sworn statement that made Martin's attempt to blame her collapse under its own arrogance. Claire approached first. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her clutch. I didn't know if I should come. Why did you? Claire asked. Dr. Shah invited me to hear the patient family speakers. She said accountability is not the same as disappearing. Vanessa's mouth twisted. I'm still deciding whether I believe her. Claire glanced at Annika across the room. She is usually right. Vanessa looked at the pearls. Shame crossed her face again, quieter now. They belong on you. They belong to my mother, Claire said. Tonight, I'm borrowing them. Vanessa nodded. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Claire took a moment before answering. I believe you are sorry. I also believe I do not need to carry your apology for you. Vanessa absorbed that, then gave a small nod. That's fair. It was not forgiveness exactly, it was something cleaner, a boundary without hatred. Across the ballroom, Martin appeared on a television screen in a news segment, not as the honored surgeon of old, but in a brief report about the foundation audit settlement. The sound was muted. His face looked thinner, his smile practiced and strained. The caption mentioned repayment, resignation from leadership roles, and ongoing divorce proceedings. No one stopped talking to watch. Claire realized that was the final humiliation for a man like Martin. Not outrage, not public screaming, irrelevance. Annika took the stage and introduced a mother whose 6-year-old son had received surgery funded by the initiative. The mother spoke with shaking hands and a clear voice. She thanked the doctors, the nurses, the donors, and the administrative staff who had helped with travel, lodging, and aftercare. She did not thank Martin. Claire felt tears rise then, sudden and inconvenient. She let them. They were not the helpless tears Martin had once predicted. They were grief leaving through an unlocked door. After the speeches, Annika called Claire to the stage. Claire had not expected it. She almost shook her head, but Evelyn, seated at the front, gave her the look she had used when Claire was 20 and afraid of boardrooms. Stand up. Claire stood. The applause was warm, not explosive. She walked to the microphone and looked out at the room where her marriage had publicly cracked open and something truer had stepped through. 3 months ago, she said, I stood here on a night I thought would be remembered for humiliation. I was wrong. The room quieted. It became the night I remembered the difference between being quiet and being powerless. Quiet can be strategy. Quiet can be grief. Quiet can be patience while the truth gathers its documents. But quiet should never be mistaken for consent. Evelyn's eyes shone. Diane stood at the door, expression unreadable but proud. Claire continued. This initiative will keep funding surgeries, lodging, aftercare, and research because no child's future should depend on one person's reputation. Institutions must be stronger than egos. Families must be safer than appearances. And women must be allowed to protect what is theirs without being called cruel for refusing to be robbed politely. This time the applause rose with force. Claire did not look for Martin. He was not there. More importantly, she was not looking anymore. Chapter 10. The divorce finalized on a gray morning in December. There was no grand confrontation, no shouting in the courthouse, no last-minute confession that healed what had been broken. Martin arrived with Conrad, signed where he was told, and avoided Claire's eyes until the very end. The settlement confirmed what the documents had said from the beginning. Ashford Trust assets remained Claire's separate property. The Fairmont house stayed hers. The foundation funds were restored through repayment and insurance recovery. Actual marital assets were divided according to law, less dramatically than Martin once threatened, and more fairly than he deserved. He lost leadership titles, donor access, and the public myth that had made him feel untouchable. He kept his medical license under conditions and returned to clinical work far from cameras. Claire did not object. She had never wanted his patients punished for his pride. Outside the courthouse, he stopped beside her. For a long moment they stood under the stone archway, two people who had once shared a kitchen, a bed, a calendar, 1,000 ordinary mornings, and one extraordinary failure. I thought you would fight differently, Martin said. Claire looked at the street where winter light lay pale on the cars. How? I thought you would cry, beg, try to make me feel guilty, his mouth tightened, or try to ruin me completely. I know. That had been his mistake from the beginning. He had prepared for either weakness or revenge. He had not prepared for boundaries. He turned toward her. Did you ever think about forgiving me? Claire considered the question honestly. Yes. Hope moved across his face, quick and almost boyish. She continued. Then I realized forgiveness is not the same as restoration. I can stop letting anger decide my days without giving you access to my life. The hope vanished. He nodded once, as if accepting a medical result he disliked but could not dispute. Vanessa left the city. Claire said nothing. She sent me a letter, he added. She said I taught her the cost of wanting someone else's place. Claire thought of the pearls, the ballroom, the red hotel key light, the flash drive on the glass table. That sounds like a lesson she paid for. And me? He asked, bitterness returning because humility had never stayed long in him. What lesson did I pay for? Claire finally looked at him. That love is not ownership. Access is not ownership. Silence is not weakness. And a woman you underestimate may still be reading every document you signed. For once, Martin did not answer. Claire walked down the courthouse steps alone. Evelyn waited by the car, holding a paper cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone pretending not to be emotional. Well, Evelyn asked. It's done. Good. Evelyn handed her the coffee. Your mother would be insufferably proud. Claire laughed, and the sound surprised her. It had been months since laughter came without checking whether it was appropriate. That afternoon she returned to the Fairmont house. She did not go to the grand library first or the formal dining room where Martin had once held court. She went to the small room at the back of the house that had been her mother's studio. For years it had been storage. Boxes, old frames, rolled rugs, things she planned to handle when life calmed down. Life had not calmed down. She had. She opened the curtains. Winter light filled the room. Dust lifted like tiny sparks. On the desk lay a file Evelyn had sent over that morning. Plans for the Ashford Initiative's next project, a recovery residence for families traveling for pediatric surgery. Not glamorous, not headline-driven. Necessary. Claire ran her fingers over the first page. Her marriage had ended because Martin wanted to go back to a former lover and take a future he had not earned. He had filed papers expecting to freeze her in place. Instead, she had taken every asset that was hers, not to punish love, but to protect legacy, labor, and lives that depended on truth. There had been a time when she thought strength would feel like victory over him. Subscribe for more stories from her new peak about quiet women, hidden power, and the moment betrayal meets consequences.